behind this scene. Now, moving on, the Kenya employers think it is too soon to implement the NSSF Act of 2013, noting that whereas they have instructed their members to follow the new directive, a lot more needs to be deliberated between the government and the employers. Noah Kipkemboy now joins us with the latest in this regard. Noah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jimmy. We understand the situation between the Federation of Kenyan Employees and the government in regards to the NSSF Act number 45 of 2013 and its implementation. We understand that they are supposed to remit more money, and that's becoming a challenge. Every time you mention more money, it becomes a challenge in itself. Question first. Today, of course, the FKE has spoken, and they started by setting the foundation about the status of employment in the country, and they termed it as gloomy.
Businesses in Kenya are struggling, and many of them are either closing shop or on the verge of closing shop in Kenya. For example, the flower sector has reported that 8 companies closed shop in Kenya in the last 2 years due to the high cost of doing business. Many retail stores have closed down, including the small businesses. We have many empty retail business spaces. The drought has brought our agricultural sector on its knees. Over 11 companies listed on the Nairobi Securities Exchange have issued profit warnings in the last 2 years. The weak shilling and the high cost of imports of raw materials are affecting our manufacturing. We have also seen several multinationals closing shop in Kenya, while others continue to scale down their presence in Kenya as they opt for better production locations.
And now to the core issue of NSSF Act. The employers are saying that this particular act actually is a brainchild of employers in the country, but their worry is that the implementation framework is a little bit off. First of all, they have quite a number of concerns in regards to this act, which is coming into effect actually by the 9th of March. So this is what they had to say in that regard.
From the time that the act was passed, we wanted a definition, clarity on what pensionable earnings are. We wanted clarity and still want clarity on how gratuity will be handled, because a lot of employers actually have contracts which they've signed with their employees that have in it a gratuity clause that you earn at the end of your period of contract, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years, whatever that period is. And that under that particular contract is actually the pension element. So we want the gratuity factored in, and perhaps at the point of transiting to the NSSF Act, we would like to have that gratuity, whatever amounts have been deducted, to be factored in, maybe put into the employee's pension as their contribution for the years that they served under that contract. So it's important to recognize the place of the gratuity contributions that we have. The other area that we would want to see addressed is opting out by employers, because the Act recognizes that only the first tier of contributions go to NSSF. Employers have the right to opt out of Tier 2 contributions, which is actually 2/3. So if you have 12% contribution, 6 by the employer, 6 by the employee, 2/3 of that should go to Tier 2. And employers who currently have private pension schemes have the right, the freedom to decide to opt out. You have to apply to the RBA, and we know RBA has put in a lot of work to have the documentation and the processes ready, but there is a snag that there's a 2-month wait period. So even if the RBA desired to allow employers to opt out, that cannot happen until after 2 months. So we'd like this process simplified so that there's automatic opt-out, and for employers to be given time to be able to opt out. The other area that we've been talking about and wanting addressed is the issue of taxing pension. When you earn money and you pay tax by way of pay as you earn, that income is already taxed, and we are appealing that pension not be taxed, because it then defeats the very idea we are having, which is a good one, of encouraging Kenyans to save.
With all these concerns raised by the FKE, what are they advising their member? Because NSSF is ready to go. They have issued a directive that the new contributions should be made as required. What does FKE actually advise its members?
We have advised our employers to adjust their level of contributions to match what is required under the new act. But there is a challenge with regard to Tier 2. They can remit Tier 1 contributions, but for Tier 2 contributions, for employers who have private pension schemes in particular, there is a challenge, and that is where we want social dialogue. What do? Because they will not have got the opt-out authority or exemption from RBA, and they cannot remit it to NSSF because they want to remit it to their private pension scheme. And they can only do that once they get that exemption. So there's a practical challenge, which is where we are engaging.
And finally, Jimmy, with all these policy changes, how will it impact the employment ecosystem and the employment terrain in the country?
When there is so much pressure on the employers in terms of the cost of doing business, they also find it difficult to survive and therefore contribute to that element. And what will happen is that you'll get that the formal employment will inevitably start shrinking. Now, if you are relying on that formal employment proportion for you to raise most of these revenues, you can see the challenge that you're getting into. So one, the formal employment is shrinking, and yet you're relying on that formal employment for purpose of funding your budget. So we are just getting into this, challenging, very, sort of vicious kind of cycle, whereby it's shrinking, and yet you're trying to extract the maximum out of that shrinking base.
Well, Jimmy, that's the letters from their employers' corner and their concerns touching on NSSF contributions. And they say that there should be more dialogue, more engagement on these core issues, even as we roll out the new act. But that's the latest from this end. Back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Noah, for that story. And of course, that is a matter that is currently in court. It has been challenged at the Supreme Court, and we will be here to tell you what comes out of that court case. And that is how we want to wrap up this edition of Business Today. Thank you for keeping me company throughout the week. Let's do this again sometime soon. Good afternoon.